Welcome to the Clear the Shelf podcast with Chris and Chris, the show that meets at the intersection of education and entertainment to discuss online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, wholesale, and all facets of selling on Amazon. We'll bring you news, tactics, strategies, insights, stories, and interviews to help you grow your Amazon business. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Grant and Chris Rasick. What's up, Amazon sellers, and welcome back to the Clear the Shelf podcast with myself and my apothegmatic co-host, Chris Rasick. Today, we've got friend of the show, Jeff Storch, back. Jeff's a $25 million a year Amazon seller, a defender of arbitrage, and one of the loudest and probably most rational voices reminding sellers that every model works if you work it. He was last on the show about a year ago, and since then, honestly, Amazon's been a little bit of a roller coaster. We've had new rules, we've had brand gatings, and a lot of sellers in the space wondering if it's still worth it. So we figured what better time to bring back a steady hand in the middle of all this chaos. So today we're going to talk about where the opportunity still is. We're going to dive into how Jeff handles returns more like a business unit than just a pain in the neck, why diversification matters, and I want to dive a little bit into how he balances life along with business. Jeff, thanks for coming back, man. I appreciate you.
Yo, what's going on, guys?
Not too much,
Happy
man.
to be back here.
Good. How was ski season this year?
It was great. We spent, I think we had about a little over 50 days in Killington, Vermont, which is where we have our home base in the winter. And we just got back from a week in Utah.
That's awesome. I saw some of the videos you posted of the kids. They were getting some air, man.
Yeah, they're insane. Which I just say the most important thing about the season is we all came back healthy and no injuries. So
yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, before we dive in, you guys know the drill. It takes us minutes to prepare for each one of these shows. So if you find some value in this episode, do us a solid. Share it on social media. Tag Chris and I so we can thank you. It means a ton to us. It helps keep us motivated and to be able to bring back guests like Jeff to share their knowledge with you. So let's dive into a bunch of things. We're going to be all over the map today. Jeff, one of the things that I appreciate is you're honest and your candor on Twitter is really nice. And I know you've been at this for a long time. I guess I kind of just want to get what's your gut feeling of the marketplace right now? Like what do you see the lay of the land is?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely been interesting, as you said, since the year that interesting year since we're last on this podcast, and this regating stuff has definitely been concerning to an extent of they just haven't provided a lot of clarity on what's going on. So my stance has always been this is still going to be an opportunity. Amazon is the best platform that you can sell on. Walmart has some potential. There's other platforms trying to get on there, but there's no other place that you can get the eyeballs you can get on Amazon. And for my approach, which is something that I do a lot within my business, and what I also recommend a lot of people is being diversified. Do not have 95% of your revenue tied to one brand, because it's not your platform, and there's going to be risks selling on third-party platforms, and you want to diversify that risk. I don't see Amazon, the arbitrage dead that, we've been hearing for 10 years. It is happening. I don't think that's what it is. I just think that they're tightening up some of the controls, trying to minimize, some of the fraud and, bad sellers out there. And unfortunately, a lot of good sellers got caught up in the past 6 months or so when they've been doing some of these brand gatings. And of course, there's situations like Coach and Kate Spade where they're just trying to, be the authorized seller themselves, and you're going to run into that, and that's a risk, when you build your business off of another platform. But I still think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think it's more important than ever to mitigate some of the risks by not being a 100% single brand focused.
Mm-hmm. I've taken a lot of guesses at why Amazon's doing this, and you mentioned one of them. You know, they're trying to make sure that the counterfeit and the stolen goods and stuff like that are off the platform. Do you think that is like a majority of why this is happening? Why the Section 3s happened? Why, you know, they're making it more difficult to get ungated? Or is there anything else that you think could actually be causing that maybe we're not thinking of yet?
I mean, I really do believe that's what it is. You know, they're a giant organization and they're trying to, you know, minimize the challenges. There's a lot of bad press out there, you know, about some of this, you know, the counterfeit and the bad sellers out there. And I just think they've done a pretty poor job of executing this. But I do think that's one of the main things. I mean, they could be trying to trim the number of sellers and try to, you know, let some of the older sellers and larger sellers like myself, you know, have a better advantage, I guess. I you know, outside of like the brand wide restrictions, we haven't been, you know, affected with a lot of these regates. Obviously, again, as I mentioned, something like Kate Spade, Coach, you know, that affected everybody. You know, the Adidas-gate that happened, you know, which really was a small, well, I know a small percentage for me, but I think it really mattered where you did your sourcing with Adidas. But you know, didn't affect, you know, it affected everyone. But you know, again, I do feel they're really trying to do their best in policing the third party marketplace. It's just they're not usually very great at executing it, as we've seen over the years.
Yeah, using hand grenades when they need to use the scalpel. Yeah,
exactly.
So, okay, so you bringing up Adidas-gate takes me down one other avenue. Yeah, I know that a lot of new sellers who get into the space for one reason or another, they're drawn to Nike. And man, so whenever I want to look at variation listings, I actually use Nike Air Monarchs as kind of the example.
Yep.
And I was looking at that listing yesterday or the day before, and holy crap, is it garbage now? And so I start to understand, I understand why Amazon wants to do these kind of things. But one of the big fears out there is that Amazon is going to pull an Adidas with Nike. If you could read the tea leaves, do you think that is likely to happen, or you think Nike wants to go another way than Adidas does?
Yeah, I mean, I do not think that's happening. You know, I think there was, you know, a LinkedIn post shared, I think like 6-9 months ago, where you know, some random person said something about, hey, this is going to happen. And then all the PL gurus are posting it is going to happen on Twitter and whatnot. But, you know, I don't foresee it happening. And you could have the situation what happens with like Under Armour, and to an extent would happen with Adidas, where, hey, maybe Nike starts selling direct to Amazon, and Amazon starts to restrict. You could also have Nike that starts selling on Amazon directly. You know, you don't know. And, you know, I think, again, like I said earlier, it's just good to be diversified. Don't run your whole business off of Nike. Like, you know, you just don't know. Like, you know, you had people that were fully on Coach, boom, their whole business got shut down. And, you know, then I think it was Kate Spade, then it was Coach, then a year later it was Kate Spade, and then I think 6 months later it was Michael Kors.
Yep.
And now that one you could see because they're all owned by the same company. And I know the beauty category got hammered too with, you know, a lot of these restrictions. So it's definitely a risk, and definitely something that I would recommend keeping your stock, your brand diversified, and your stock, you don't buy 6 months of, you know, any brand, you know, unless it's your wholesale, direct, or Lego. You can always sell Lego.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, I think it's interesting. You know, part of the reason that we like how rational you are on Twitter and why we appreciate it is because the negative comments are always the loudest and the stickiest, right? So to be in the game as long as you have, I want to talk about maybe this may be a difficult question for you to answer. I apologize in advance, but I want to talk about like resiliency, like to be in the game as long as you have. How do you avoid the cumulative resentment that we hear from so many seasoned sellers that become jaded? Like what brings you back? Is it simply just be in a business, taking the emotion out of it, or what can you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Amazon can be a crappy partner. They just can, right? And I just try to look at it as, look, they're trying to build something that offers, their goal was lowest prices, and have a large supply. What is the world's largest supply? I forget. I'm completely butchering their mission, but the point being is, I try not to take it personal, and I try to build my business to mitigate the risks that I know exist. And in particular, in 2020, I did have a $20 million business that was 85% Nike, and I got a couple Nike. I got a Nike brand review, and my catalog went all my Nike went restricted. I had 7 figures of Nike, that I couldn't sell. And that really, is a scary place to be. And that's where, where I sort of stepped back and said, okay, maybe not being fully in one brand is the best approach. And how do we build this to mitigate this risk? And, really there's 2 options. I'm trying to build my own website and, sell Nike there, or I can play by Amazon rules and understand that the risks that associate with selling on the largest, e-commerce platform that exists for us here in the US. So that's what I did. And, we got Nike back. I was only out, I think, for like 48 hours, but it's still a scary place to be. And I had another Nike, brand restriction, brand review, I think 6 months before that. So, between those 2, it's time to diversify. So that's why we do it. We do not carry. We try to keep our brand down to 5% of our inventory. We don't carry 25% of a single brand. It's harder, to manage the business that way. It's easy to get excited and hammer one brand, but to me, it's not worth the risk.
So sticking with the gatings and whatnot, you mentioned, you put a 5% cap on your inventory. Are there any other metrics that you keep track of to be able to spot when one brand or supplier is becoming too big of a risk to your catalog?
No, really. I mean, that's the major one is, and there'll be ebbs and flows, right? And in particular, it also, I don't want to make the wholesale gurus too happy either, but hey, if it's brand direct, it is a little bit safer, right? Again, there's definitely risks, and I've had multiple, wholesale, suppliers I've had to threaten to sue because they're trying to make me, pull off my items that I bought directly from them off of Amazon. But that's really what we're watching. Hey, how deep are we in any brand? And again, we set 5%. There's going to be times we go over that, especially a seasonality, but that's really what we do is to try to minimize it and try to spread it out so that, not one brand's going to, bankrupt us.
Mm-hmm. Since we're on the topic of diversity, how important is it today to diversify among different marketplaces or sales channels?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously another, a good one. And that definitely, early on would hurt a lot because you get knocked out on, get restricted on a brand, Coach, Michael Kors, even just a product. And you may have, five figures of it, and how are you going to, move that product? So we've definitely, looked to really focus on that in the past year. We've been on Walmart for a couple of years, but really starting to build onto that. We added, eBay last year as well, which is surprisingly good for, quite a bit of items that you can at least recap your costs on some of these items. And then we even added a retail store as well that is a great means of moving product that we can't sell on Amazon. I think we did on Saturday we sold $4,500 worth of stuff out of the retail store. So, not replacing my Amazon income by any means, but it's a good way of where my main focus on there is, moving, items that I can't sell on Amazon anymore. It's a good way to move product.
If you don't mind, I'd love to learn a little bit more about the retail location, because I recently one of those liquidation style stores opened up not too far from me. And I walked in. I didn't know what to expect. I walked in on a Thursday. Come to find out, Thursday is their cheapest day of the week. Everything is $2, and the place was a madhouse. And seeing that, when I walked in, I immediately looked at my wife and I said, "This is our next business." I have pulled back just a little bit since then and let let that calm down. But like, what are the pros and cons of the retail business on your end?
Yeah. I mean, the pros, there's two big pros on it. One, it makes conversations with wholesalers much easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a retail store. We're not just, the bargain bin selling, the stuff like that, but we have a legit retail store that we can put the products on. And, lots of times when you're, talking to a wholesale supplier, they won't talk to you if you don't have a retail store. So that really opens up, some of the conversations, and it just has us stand out a little different than, the average Amazon seller that might be, that doesn't have it. So that was one of the big pros and one of the reasons that we were interested in it. And two, as I said, moving inventory that, we can't move. And obviously, I guess the third one would be you're not paying the fees, right? So, Amazon, any of these platforms, they're taking 20, 30% when you factor in all the, fees into it. A little bit less if you're doing the shipping yourself, but so it really allows you to either sell the item for a lower price and still get the same net, or sell it at the same price and get more net.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the pros. I mean, the cons are, I'm trying to drive traffic to my specific location compared to the Amazon platform. So it's I can get a Lego set that I can list on Amazon, and I can sell 50 in a day, week, month, depending on its demand. And I might move 3 in a month on Amazon, in the retail store, even if it's super popular on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So and it's just you just can't do the volume out of there. So for us, it's a good way to have another platform to move those items. And we do a lot of like, hey, this item is it's not brand new anymore, but it's hey, it's a hoodie that doesn't have a tag. It's a it's a like, I think this is a Walmart version, but it's one of these cups that has a little ding on it, right? So I can't sell it on Amazon as new. Let's throw it in the retail store 25% off, 50% off, 75% off, depending, and drive people in there that way. So
mm-hmm. Are you guys just open like once a week, or are you open a couple times a week?
We are open 5 days a week.
Nice.
We close on Tuesdays and Sundays, and we're open the rest of the week. But the way we have it set up, right? So what happened was, in our existing warehouse space that had about 6,000 square feet, we needed more space. Mm-hmm. We got the one next door, which was about 12,000, and total, I think actually 7,000. So it's 14,000 total. And they had like 1,000 square feet up of office space. Well, our initial warehouse, we have all our offices. I didn't need more offices. So hey, this is a good place to throw a retail store. So that's why we did it. So it's all right in front of our warehousing space. Now, one of the cons is I'm not operating this in a heavy traffic retail space. I'm operating it in a sort of mixed use space. Mm-hmm. We have a dance studio next to us. We have a wood flooring place and whatnot. But these are not heavy traffic places. So, but we got a little bit of traffic in there. And what we do is we just open sort of business hours. So we have my employees that works in the retail store is sort of my eBay customer return person. So she's in the warehouse working, and then somebody comes in or starts parks in the area. She gets alerted from a camera, and she goes and there works in the store. So she's not just sitting there. So it doesn't really hurt for us to stay open during the week, even if we don't get a lot of traffic, because she's working on other things.
Nice. And just because I'm curious, how are you guys driving traffic? Are you using, are you running Facebook ads? Are you putting, posts up on Facebook Marketplace? Like, what's working there?
Yeah, we do a little bit of both. So we do the Facebook Marketplace post to drive people in. We do toy around a little bit with Facebook marketing, but a lot of it is just almost like free marketing, of going into different Facebook groups and posting, hey, we're having a sale, trying to find, hey, if there's a local Lego group, posting because we have a lot of Lego, and just trying to build traffic that way. And then we'll do sort of what we call warehouse sale events, and then we'll sort of advertise that a little bit more. Again, a lot of it's just more free advertising, throwing on a Facebook Marketplace, throw it into different groups, posting it on yard sale groups, even though it's not really a yard sale, but sort of try to capture that yard sale mentality of people looking for the deals and whatnot. So, nice. And then try to get them in. Yeah, we're on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll post some stuff on there. And collect emails when somebody comes in, and we can email them, yard deals and sales and stuff like that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's really interesting wrinkle. Jeff, you've been real consistent with your messaging regarding that all the models will work as long as you do the work, right? And you say that obviously from experience. So my question is, how do you determine what suits you the most? Because I imagine there's probably a fine line between diversification and shiny object syndrome, right?
Yes.
So how do you balance that?
Yeah, and so what I'd always recommend for somebody that's starting is, one, figure out what does work for you, which was, I think, one of your original questions, is what works best for you. And it really depends, right? If you're a people person and you like to talk to people, and especially if you're sales background, then wholesale might be better for you, or at least RA, and out there you're trying to work deals with managers. If you're more of a data guy and like numbers, and maybe you're like me and was frugal growing up because you had no money and you're used to finding deals, then maybe OA for you, or RA. So for me, I was always OA was always what I was best at, of being able to find products online, read the Keepa charts, and being a bit of a data geek. That was my strong suit. I did a bunch of RA, but just didn't love it. And for me, it was always a challenge to scale it. And then wholesale, again, my strong point is not calling up suppliers and small talk and trying to do that. So I knew those weren't my expertise, and so that's where I've always focused on my business, is OA. But as I scaled beyond a one-man, two, 3-person team, was okay, these models all work. I'm just not the one to be focusing my time on these. So let me hire some people that are, because I don't need to be like, why just do OA? There's a lot of value in wholesale. There's a lot of value in RA. Let me just find people that are good at it, because, hey, I know these are not my strong points. So really that's what I think is key, is identifying what works for you, put your time and effort into that. And then, if it makes sense, add other models, because it is good to have that level of diversification, so that, again, I don't think RA or OA is going anywhere, but hey, if things tighten up, it also helps, me keep to my 5%, your brand, try to keep it below 5%, because I have wholesale, I have RA, I have OA. So sort of that's how we structure it, and how I sort of focused in is, this is what I found out that I'm good at. So that's what I focus on, and then hire other people that are better to manage the other areas.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost it's essentially how big conglomerates work too. It's diversify, and it kind of helps absorb a bad quarter in one division or something like that. It's interesting how it translates from kind of prioritizing and outsourcing into the broader management of your business as a whole. That's really interesting to me.
Yeah,
and playing to your strengths.
Yeah, and I think the key too is as you said with the shiny objects, don't be trying to do all three at the same time. your first month into this,
Mhm.
or at least dabble, but figure out which one you're good, focus on it, then add both. And you can still do, I mean, I know there's people that, have smaller teams and can manage doing both, but just something to keep in mind. And as I said, for me, I knew OA was really where I was better at and better fit my lifestyle and skill set. So that's where I'll focus my side on and hire other folks to do the rest.
Speaking of OA, like sourcing is one of those things that people always they're looking for the next hack, they're looking for the next trick. And I'm curious, like when you talk to people, what do you think some of the biggest mistakes that newer OA sellers are making in their business?
Let's see. I mean, I think some of the focus too is, focusing too much on a single brand, right? Or a single store that they've heard people talk about. Oh, everybody talks about Nike socks. Let me figure out how to make Nike socks work. I think it's key to really understand that there's a lot out there, and don't just focus on one brand, one store, and try to replicate everything you see. I'm not a big reverse sourcing person, which I know is a lot of what's sort of pushed out there of, hey, you can make just get whatever, get a reverse sourcing tool and scan these sellers stores, but you're sort of chasing what somebody probably got at a better deal than you did. I'm more of go to a different site, learn the sales cycle of that site, and identify your products that way versus the reverse sourcing. Now, reverse sourcing can still work, it still has its value. We still do it. For wholesale, I think it makes a little bit more sense. But with the online arbitrage side of it, I'm a big fan of utilizing the front end sourcing instead of going after what people already have in their stores.
That's fair. So I want to dig into returns a little more. Now you mentioned your retail store. I don't know if you can put a number on that as far as how much your retail side handles your returns, but I'm assuming there's still a significant amount to get liquidated. So what else is in your return system that actually helps you make some money from the death pile?
Yeah. So what we do, right, is we get it in. I have a whole returns team because we have a lot of returns, and we scan the product. So I built this system many years ago in a Google Sheet, but you scan the LPN, and it pulls out, okay, what was the cost of the item, what was the customer comment, what was the return reason. Then my returns team looks at that, evaluates it. Now we all know lots of times that customer comment can be just bull BS, right? They want to return it not because there's anything wrong with it, but if they say there's something wrong with it, they don't have to pay the ship back, right? So, but it at least gives you some insight, especially if you have like a complicated, board game and it says it's missing a piece, then it gives my returns team, ability to assess it. So they utilize that data that's presented to them to evaluate it. Probably 50% goes back new to Amazon. It's just a large percentage is still fine, especially in the clothing and shoe categories, which we do sell a decent amount in. And then after that, okay, it's not new. It's a Lego set. The box is completely trashed. I should say trashed. It's just it's got a hole in it. It's it can't go new anymore. So then they evaluate it and say, okay, where should we sell it? Will it do better on eBay or will it do better in the store? And actually let's forget Lego, because Lego is a little bit different. Let's say it's a what we'll call it a Nerf gun, right? So it's a small Nerf gun, so not massive to ship, but it's a small Nerf gun, and it's been discontinued for a year. So it's a small crappy Nerf gun, and it's selling for $120 on Amazon. And so that shows them, hey, let's take a look at eBay. And then they check their sold listings. Hey, it looks like it's moving for $80 on eBay. That's not a good item for the retail store. Nobody's coming into the retail store to buy an $80 Nerf gun. They want the Nerf gun for $10, especially because we're trying to market ourselves as the deal site. So If it's a Nerf gun that's discontinued, that's going to go on eBay. If it's a Nerf gun that's selling on Amazon for $12.99, boom, we'll throw it in the retail store for $4.99. It's really looking at, okay, if this is readily in supply, then we'll market cheaper than you can get it and liquidate it out of the retail store, because it's not going to be worth it to throw it on eBay, even if it's $19.99, right? Like, it's just not going to be worth it, because if it's selling $19.99 brand new on Amazon, what am I going to get on eBay? $14.99 and cost me $8 to ship. So those are decisions that they're making and really it ends up being sort of those discontinued items, or more expensive like sneakers that have damage. Those will do better on eBay, and then more modern or more current items, they'll go in the retail store, and we tend to try to sell it at a deal, but hopefully we can at least get some of our costs back, if not all of our costs.
Now I have so pardon me if this is ignorant, but you said that you scan the LPN. Is that all available through Seller Central? Because I mean, my system involves like packages piled up in a chair in the living room. So I'm not sophisticated. So is that all information provided through Amazon?
Yes. So
okay,
what we we download various reports out of Seller Central, and then we build it off of like VLOOKUPs, so that when you scan the LPN into the cell in Excel, then the next cell over saying, okay, let me look for that ASIN into the customer return report and pull out the return reason. So, we've built this sort of template. We're actually utilizing it in some software now, but we used to do it all, in the spreadsheet, and, have these lookups, and it allows you to get that data, so that it helps make it easier making some of the decisions. And for my team, so especially because it's one thing if I'm doing it, right? I probably would recognize it and know what it costs. But, as you have other people processing it, you want them to have at least an idea. Where was it bought? What was the cost? Obviously, they'll also pull in the current selling price. But, hey, what did we spend for it? Where did we buy it? And on that. And when you're just looking at it without having that data, it's a little bit more complex, and it'll speed up the processing knowing what the return reason is.
So I know you've got a team, you got like an operations team. Can you talk a little bit about like what each person does in your business, and maybe even touch on like what is the right what's the right way to hire? Like I should hire this person first, and then this person, and so on.
I don't know if I know the right way, but I probably know what not to do. But I will share at least some of the experiences. So, for me, the first thing I outsourced was prep. Right? When I started this, I had a full-time job, and I was like, oh, this is pretty easy. I'll order a bunch of stuff into here, and it's like, oh crap, how am I going to prep this? When am I going to prep this? So for me, the first, and of course, what I would always recommend is do it yourself first. Figure out how to prep, learn that process, then quickly realize that's not my strong point, let alone fit with my schedule. So let's outsource prep. So I initially went to a prep center, especially for OA. It can be very beneficial because unless you live in a sales tax exempt state, you can sign up for a prep center in a sales tax exempt state. I'll get that correctly eventually here. And your prep costs can end up being less than the sales tax savings that you get. So that's usually what I would recommend outsourcing first. And then eventually started to bring somebody in-house, especially as certain items you want to merchant fulfill, right? It's Q4, especially nowadays with the turnaround time with some of the FBA stuff, I need somebody in-house to help do that. And, I used to have somebody come into my, back when I was working a full-time job, I hired somebody else who was working a full-time job, and she would show up at my house at 9:00 at night after I got the kids to bed, and we would work in the garage until 1:00. And she'd help me prep. So, and merchant fulfill stuff. And then sort of as you got that model going of, purchase and prep, then you get to a point that if you have the capital and you want to get more products and the time is the issue, that's where it's okay. How do I source more? And for me, the next step was let me hire people to help source. And I initially started with the prep person that started with me. She ended up being my first sourcer, but I initially started with, hey, it's Q4. I have this massive list of stuff that I know is profitable in stores, but I can't get out there. So I just built lists. And that's where I started, was more list buyers of, not that they were utilizing lists, but I was creating lists and they were running out and getting it. And then, eventually said, okay, you're pretty good at this. Let's see if we can actually get you sourcing on your own. And that's, because then again, you're getting yourself further removed. If you can train somebody to do it, they're purchasing it. So, next for me was, hey, now we got this role. And I had, I think 8 to 10 RA sourcers. I had an OA sourcer, and I'm doing all the operations stuff. And I can't keep up. And that's where I said, okay, it's time to hire an operations person. And that's the one that's when I think people are the slowest. And I was definitely the slowest on. And you can probably move that person in sooner and be more efficient. Because for me, at some point I was doing, 40 hours of operation work, especially, at one point we had, as I said, I think we had like 5 or 7 RA people, and they'd bring all the stuff in. They'd give me all their buy list, and I'm getting them all, putting them all together, getting them shipped to our warehouse, the prep, and dealing with all the Amazon seller performance issues, and the operation stuff can really get big quickly. So that was the approach I took. Whether that's the right approach is a whole different story, but that was the approach I took.
Thank you for listening to the Clear the Shelf podcast. My magnanimous co-host Chris Rasick has put together a gift for you for being a listener. It's called the Monthly Goal Tracking Spreadsheet, and it's free. The spreadsheet will help you break down and track how much you've purchased, which should be a leading indicator of how much you will sell, and then you'll be able to track how much you've sold as well as your estimated monthly profit on a daily basis. This will all feed into the daily averages so you can ensure that you're on track to meet your goals each and every month. Grab it for free today over at cleartheshelf.com/goal-tracking. Thanks again for being a listener. Now back to the show. Some people will hire a sourcing person. That'll be like their first hire before they outsource prep or anything like that.
Yep.
And oftentimes it seems like it's a crutch. So maybe they don't feel like they're a great sourcer, so they'll get someone else to help them with it. But I mean, we know that probably isn't going to work. So how do you help someone gain the skill set of becoming good at sourcing when maybe it's not like, it's not a common thing to just be good at that?
Yeah, it's a very hard position to fill, is a sourcing position, because as you said, how do you hire for that? And I got very good at writing. This is even before AI, but very good at writing copy, so that when I post something on Indeed, I'd end up I'd post a listing. I wake up the next day and I have 200 applicants that all want to work, because it's you can make it sound super exciting. Hey, you're going to get paid to shop online, and it's not going to cost you a dime. And so and you're also not, for OA at least, you're not focused on a specific area. RA is a little harder because now you're okay. Hey, you're a smaller location, but again, you still get I still, especially at certain locations, I still get 100 applicants in 24 hours. So then the question of how to weeding them out is a challenge. So I tended to focus on data people. Try to find people that were good at data, because to me that's what sourcing is, right? But really it is two things, right? You need to have the ability to read a Keepa chart, and then you need to be able to find the product that's good enough to even read the Keepa chart. And that's the one that's hard, because I can find a data person and they can be good at reading the Keepa charts, but they're not always good at knowing how to source, how to find the products, and have that consistency of keep sourcing. And it's almost like baseball. It's one of the things you're going to fail a heck of a lot more than you're going to be successful, but you have to understand not to get discouraged. And once you find that that item, especially like if you're sourcing shoes, you find one good shoe that can be $2,000 spend. You find you do that 5 times, you find one item, a day at $2,000. That's $10,000 a week. That's $40,000 a month, $50,000 a month to spend, which is, where I sort of would like my entry, OA people to be at. But that's a lot of, you could source for 8 hours and you only find one item. So it's somebody that isn't going to give up. I don't have the answers how to find them. We've probably hired over, at this point, 60 or 70 sourcers. And I think I have, under 10 that are still on my team. So again, sort of like the OA of finding the items, finding the people that are good at it. I strike out a lot as well, but, it's, you're sort of just, and then from a training perspective, we utilize the OA challenge. So somebody comes in and boom, here, check out the OA challenge. You guys, because you've already created, the blueprint of, sourcing, so let's, instead of me trying to recreate the wheel, let me use something that I believe in. So I start them out with that. And then, and then we start to train them on our criteria and, some things that are more specific to us, but that's always a good entry point for anybody that's trying to learn OA.
I appreciate the commercial. Checks in the mail, man. So, okay, this may be an oddball question. It's probably not something that you track, but Chris says this all the time. It's all about getting your reps in. If you could take a guess, what do you think we'll call it a batting average is when it comes to doing OA yourself? Like, I mean, are you hitting 300 when you source? Are you choosing 3% of the products you look at, or I guess what's that number?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I guess it really depends too. And admittedly, I don't do a massive amount of sourcing outside of Q4. Right now, I run, I spend 3-4 months, where I'm just trying to keep up with the admin stuff while I'm enjoying mountain bike and skiing season. And then, outside of that, I spend a lot of time, managing the teams. And then Q4 is where I really dive in. And then it really just depends, right? Like if there's a sale at a specific store that I've hit every Q4, it's probably 75% of the items I look at, I'm buying. And then, but if it's a new store, a new item, then I'm fighting that 5-10%, where it's, hoping to find 5%, if it's hey, this is a store I haven't personally sourced before, but, somebody said it's good, let me check it out. And, that I really think that, as you sort of alluded to, it's getting your reps in so that when you go, you go to a site, you already know, I've checked these 300 times, these 300 items, 50 times. So I'm not checking them again. I know, okay, this one's probably not good. This one has a potential. So the more you do it, the more reps you get in, the more efficient you will get at sourcing, sourcing sites that you've sourced before. And then anytime you start new, again, I would think that I have a better eye than a lot of people. That's why I'm good at it. So maybe a little bit better, but anybody that's starting a new category, new site, it's going to be a lot of misses before you find the hit.
Yeah, that's. I hope if nothing else, people who are newer that listen to this pulled this out. Because I speculated one time. I was like, I bet you if you hit 3%, a 3% hit rate, that you could do a pretty bang up job at OA. And because then you can just reverse engineer it. And I'm going to find 3 good products for every 100 I'm going to look at. Okay, so now my goal is I'm going to look at 250 products a day, and boom, I'm there. So, all right, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, it's usually when we talk about reps, it's in the context of newer sellers not realizing how much they have to look at. So it's almost an endurance exercise. But you bring up a good point too. It's also familiarity. It's not only you remember the good stuff, you remember the bad stuff, and you could become pretty efficient simply by getting your eyes in the same place over and over again and doing it for long periods of time.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I always recommend is, pick a site or a couple sites that you believe or, know that people have success with, and just learn that site. Like, again, obviously I'm big on diversification, but when you're learning, you need to get wins before you start diversifying, right? So, go to a store, whether that's Walmart, whether that's Target, where, some smaller store, and just learn the sales cycle, learn, when they mark down prices, when are new items being, new items being launched, when are, new sales running, and then, and just spend hours, just each day learning, focusing on a few stores. And, that's how you can really start to, gain some success. Again, then you want to diversify, because, what happens to a lot of people is, awesome, I've got so good at this store, so good at this brand, boom, I'm just going to keep hammering it. But, then that store changes their your purchasing rules and don't want resellers, and now your business has disappeared. But, at least when you're learning, that's how I always recommend, is learn a store, learn a sales cycle, add another store, constantly trying to add new stores, new sources. But, don't hop around all over the place. Hey, here's my 250 sites that I'm going to source, and let me source them, every day for a week. No, just pick a few, learn them, then grow and add other ones. Because then once you learn one, then, if you learn the sales cycle of a store, you don't have to source it for hours every day. You already know, okay, it's not going to be, the sales going to drop on Sunday. I'm going to take a look at it, for a few hours. I won't look at that store again until next Sunday, because that's when the sale is going to happen.
Yeah, that's a great point. You can't diversify until there's proficiency in what you're about to branch out from. It's too many sellers. Like, you take the Nike socks, they're just following orders that they read on social media or YouTube. And it's like, oh, okay, I go to the Nike outlet and I do this. And well, if that gets taken away, you don't have any skills, now you got to go learn something else. So that's a great point. So speaking of Nike socks and Nike, I want to talk about when things blow up, when you blow a flat tire. You mentioned 2 different brand reviews with Nike, and I imagine as long as you've been in the business, there are other examples as well. But when something blows up like that, whether it's an account suspension, supplier shuts you off, whatever it may be, what's your personal playbook for damage control? What can you share with us about that?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, again, I've been saying a lot here, but is, as you start to scale up, to have that level of diversification. So, we sold a decent amount of Michael Kors, and that got, and of course, I think we loaded up in Q4 with some Q4 deals, because I think that restriction happened, January, and then you had 2 months to sell through. Is again, just trying to keep yourself at a point that not one brand's going to sink you. And that's really, that was the thing that I have to keep saying it, but, that I really need to do, that you need to do, so that you don't end up the situation where it's, hey, I have, a 45% of my business on this one brand, and Amazon has gated me on it. Now, not only is your business probably done, you're probably going to go bankrupt, because you can't move the product. So trying to diversify, have other alternate channels to move product is a good one. Start to become proficient in, eBay and Walmart and, whatever, again, we use the retail store, but there's so many other opportunities out there, Mercari, Poshmark, depending on, the item. So find other ways to be able to move the product to minimize your risk, and be able to adapt. Because, as I said, it was a very scary place for us when we had 7 figures of Nike. And, again, I said it was probably 85% of our business at that point in time. Go restricted. So we really try to minimize that, so that these hits are less impactful.
What about on the supplier side? Is it the same concept to limit your exposure to certain suppliers? Is it is it the same risk assessment there?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, because, again, in that 2020 time, I would say not only were we 85% Nike, but we're almost 100% Rack Room and Off Broadway shoes, which Off Broadway I don't even think exists anymore as Rack Room. We just found a great site that we could hammer away, and we just hammered them to a point that now they have order restrictions, and they've added they restrict Nike from a lot of the coupons, and they just restrict so many different brands, and there's still money to be made at that store, but I think you can only do 25 orders a month out of them, 5 a week or something like that. I forget. They have some restrictions that they build into their system. So we really do try to not focus on a brand or a supplier, because it's a high risk that can happen, that it's going to change, and it is going to change. I mean, it's very rare that a supplier that I started buying 10 years ago is still still working the same way it did 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I believe in the fine print of Rack Room, it's actually called the Storch rule. I think I remember reading that.
It quite possibly could.
So we talked about this at the very beginning, but you guys are just now getting back from ski season, and I know during that time you guys also homeschool, and honestly, so excuse the term here, I don't know whether you like it or not, but for a lot of people who get into selling on Amazon, that's wealth. That having the ability to control their own schedule, do with their kids what they want to do, not have to answer to anybody. What do people need to focus on if they want to be able to build that kind of lifestyle business for themselves?
Yeah. I mean, I think the big thing is, is treating it like a business, especially once you sort of move off of the side hustle. Again, a lot of people are doing it as a side hustle. They have a full-time job, but you see a lot of these people that start to scale up and they don't treat it as a business. They are just, running the whole thing themselves. They're hesitant to put money into US based employees. And especially if you want to get to a point that, it's building some monetary wealth, you're going to take a lot of time. And I still work a lot, but, the ability to have that flexibility is based on hiring people, training them, and growing them to be able to run the business while I'm off skiing every day for 2 months. I think that's a key that a lot of people, hiring is hard in general. And what's the word? Letting go of things that you're good at, because, hey, I'm a great sourcer. Nobody's gonna be able to do it as good as me. Maybe true, but maybe you can hire 3 to 5 people that will be able to replicate you and build that, build the revenue and profit ability within your company, and then be able to enjoy some time, because that's really, as you said, that was the big reason I wanted to, moved into this full time was, I didn't like being tied down to the corporate job, going in and, leaving my house at, 7 a.m. and coming home at 7 o'clock at night, 5 days a week, and still being on call and weekends and traveling, being away from the kids that long. So one of the main reasons I did it was so that I can, have that time with the family.
Yeah, now you are the embodiment of, from what I can tell on your social media profiles, the embodiment of work hard, play hard. Now I want to talk about the work hard part. That's the part some people tend to skip over in that saying. How do you keep burnout at bay? How do you kind of keep that check and still be able to be present? Because you are working intensely for segments of time. So what advice can you give about staying fresh for your family once you do finally punch out?
That is a hard one, because it is hard to get away from the cell phone. It's hard to get away from even the watch, right? So okay, I got the phone somewhere else, but my watch is beeping with messages, and oh crap, what is that message? So it is difficult, and I'm sure my wife probably will say I don't do a good enough job of it, but I do think it's important to try to allocate some time for yourself. And again, that's the said the big thing I've done is when I first was doing this, especially when I had the full-time job, was okay, at night I'm going to, I was always more of a night person. Let me stay up late and work. And my wife's not much of a morning person, so we both would crawl out of bed exhausted, when we had to get up with the kids. And eventually I was like, hey, why don't I just get up in the morning? So I sort of shifted my schedule of, if I get up at 5 every day and I work from 5 to 8 before everybody's up, I'm going to get a boatload of stuff because nobody's bothering me. And my wife's sleeping anyway. So the kids are sleeping at least until 6:30, hopefully 7. So that's sort of how I shifted my schedule of, hey, let me just become a morning person. I wasn't a morning person, but I was instead of going to getting the kids to bed and relaxing with the wife, I was going to work. And then we both were sleeping. And I said, hey, why don't I swap that? So that was one of the things I did to try to make more time. And I've always tried to make it so that I'll wake up early, I'll work, and then during the week I'll work hard, but hey, when the kids are home, that's where I try to disconnect, and spend time with them. My kids are into lots of sports. I coach their football team, I coach their soccer team, and I just try to enjoy it because it goes fast. As you said, we go to Vermont for 2 months out of the year. We pull them out of public school, and my wife, I think, Chris, you said we homeschool. It's not a we. It's it's the wife homeschools them. I will help with some math stuff and some stuff, but my wife is doing the heavy lifting there of homeschooling them while we live up on the mountain. And we the way we do it is I get up early, I work, then as soon as the lift's open, we're at the lift, ready to hop on that chair, and we'll ski until lunchtime. And then we'll come come home, and it's time to do school and work. And the kids will do school, and I'll hop and work for until dinner time, and then probably a couple hours after dinner time. But it's been a real blessing to be able to hang out with them during a school day for 2 months of and just watch them do some crazy things on skis. And then we come back and they're back into school, and then summer hits and it's time to sort of repeat that a little bit with mountain biking. Though mountain biking, they don't usually bike with dad too much because they do their summer camp. So they bike in with their friends in a summer camp. But so
that's awesome. So, and I know that we've touched on this a couple of times, but like, you're $25 million a year in revenue, like, and a lot of people might be like, okay, I can go to Vermont, I can, I do all these things, I can kind of keep it where it goes, but it doesn't seem like that's the way you do things. It seems like you still have this drive. What is it that keeps you wanting to push forward and grow your business and things like that?
Probably just being too competitive. It's a blessing and a curse of just having that desire to be the best at what I do. And that's just something that I've always strived for. And I remember when I was starting myself and seeing some of the guys posting crazy numbers on social media and talking to different larger sellers, and like, well, if they can do it, why can't I do it? So that's always been my drive of just trying to be the best at what I do, and this is what I'm doing. So that's where I focus my time, and why I still push hard. And it is helpful being reconnected to the social media, because I took a little hiatus from it, and it's good just to I'm always a fan of again, obviously revenue screenshots only mean so much, but I'm always a fan of like seeing what other people are doing, and getting utilizing that as inspiration, and even if it's not revenue screenshots, just listening to what other people are doing and having success in, and saying, okay, well, that's impressive, what do I need to do to get there? How do I do that?
Yeah, I sort of miss people share. It's not it's not as popular as it once was. But I miss revenue screenshots. I wish that the people who weren't like, oh, but what's your margin?
Yeah.
I had someone say that to me about a podcast I listed the other day. Well, but what's his margin? I'm like, there's helpful information here. Like, come on, bud. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's always good to understand who's posting and what are they selling you.
Sure.
Are they selling you anything? Because unfortunately, there is the bad, right? You got the people that have been caught, posting fake screenshots just to sell their courses and and whatnot. So it is, and there's always that battle between the people that are maybe selling services and those that are trying to do the actual selling. But again, there's a lot of people that are just sharing. And again, they could be selling something. Doesn't mean what they're doing is BS, or that they're operating at no margins, which is what some people like to think. But I've always been a fan of seeing, especially as I know, I still remember. I think it was. He went by Harvey Specter, and I think he did like 1.5 million in December, and I think at that same year I did 125,000, and I was like, I had the full-time job, so it was but I like worked nonstop, and I'm like, how the hell did he do that? But I'm like, okay, but if he's doing it, and seeing that really motivated me of, okay, it can be done. This guy is doing a lot of this friggin' RA. How is he doing it, and how do we replicate that? And that's something that I've used throughout my career with selling on Amazon, of trying to use the motivation to be the best.
Did you ever get to meet Harvey? And I know that's not his real name, but I know that's what he went by on social media. Did you ever get to meet him in real life?
Yeah, I met him at ASD back in the day.
Okay, yeah, really interesting guy. I always thought it was crazy because I know when he started, like, he didn't have a printer, he didn't have a computer. He started on like an iPad, and he was like, I just figured it out.
It was always insane because, like, I am very much a data guy, and I think he was very much a feel guy. Like, this is going to be good, and I mean, he could read a Keep a chart, I'm sure, as good as anybody, but he definitely had a better feel for especially hot toys in Q4 than anybody I ever knew of. This is going to be it. I think the year of the Hatchimals, I'm sure he had more Hatchimals than probably any other retail supplier out there.
Speaking of sourcing, I want to stay there for a minute. I find it interesting, the nuance in sourcing, because when you're scaling and when you get to a certain point, certainly at your volume, it's not necessarily so much 100% the product. You also have to consider the source as well. You have to identify places that you can get the volume that you need to do the numbers that you're doing, right? So I'm curious what identifiers you use or you looked for when you were sourcing to decide whether or not to pull the trigger as it relates to a $25 million business.
Yeah. One of the things that we've, and really been something we've been focusing on this year, is understanding the profit potential of a SKU. When you're starting out, right, and you're doing everything yourself, and if an item's going to make you $30, that's $30 in your pocket. Great. But as a business, I have a lot of other operational costs that each SKU adds to my bottom line. And the more SKUs I add to my business, again, I've been talking about diversification, right? But the more SKUs I add, the more challenging it is, more operational employees I need. So really focusing on, okay, can this, and I think we put the number of more like $250. Will this item have the potential to make us $250 in a month? If so, it's worth adding that SKU to our bottom line. If it's just going to make us $20, it's probably not worth their time, because again, any item that's purchased, it's going to have to be, somebody's going to have to add it to repricing. It's going to need to be managed. It could run into, future issues. And the more SKUs we carry, the more challenges we have. So we've been trying to scale, peak SKUs around, I think 7,000, 8,000. Hey, let's get that number closer to 2,000 to 3,000. We can still be diversified. We can still be diversified around the brand. We don't have to reduce our revenues, because let's stop focusing on the things that, are only going to sell, 3 a month for $8 profit, and let's put that energy into stuff that's going to sell, 20 times, 50 times, and again, it varies because you can have something that sells 3 times, but if it's netting you, $80 a unit, then hey, we'll sell 3 or 4 of those a month. That's okay. But really, that's been one of our focuses, this year, to clean up our catalog and focus on the ones that are going to be worth our time, because the more SKUs you have, the more, whether it's either more overhead or more work that you got to manage it yourself.
So is it safe to say that philosophy of looking at the product as a whole over a longer term leads you to maybe some lower ROI numbers, that might make a newer seller kind of clutch their pearls? Does the volume play into it a little bit bigger?
I mean, our ROI lots of times I feel is actually probably higher than a lot of people would expect. We usually sitting in the 30-40%. We don't operate like I don't like the 15% margin stuff. Like, to me, that's also not worth it, right? So it's not necessarily, hey, let's go high volume, low ROI type of items, but it's, let's find the items that at least, and really it's just getting rid of those things that, hey, this thing's going to sell, $8 profit and going to sell 3 a month. Like, it's just, that to me is not worth it anymore at our scale, when the number of people that are involved with each item that's purchased. So we're not necessarily not shifting to high volume, low ROI. It's just, focus on the ones that, it could be low ROI, but it could be high profit. It could be, high ROI, and I'm gonna get that wrong. High ROI and lower profit items. That's usually what it works, right? Like, if you have a $10 item, it's easy to have high ROI, but are you really making money? Of course, that's the other thing. Make sure don't focus on, it can be very misleading. And we like to look at profit per unit sold, because it can be very misleading of, hey, I got a 60%, profit, but that's because everything I'm selling is between $10 and $15. And it's, my profit, per unit sold is $1.25. Well, probably not making money $1.25. It really depends. So we look at that, especially on the wholesale side, because that's where, you can have those, a lot of like fast moving, high volume stuff, and anytime we go to re-up with a supplier, we look and say, okay, what is our profit per unit? What's our ROI? Is it worth continuing that relationship and making purchases? Because 40% ROI, but $1.25 a unit is probably not worth our time.
At the size of catalog that you've got, I mean, and you guys must have looked at hundreds of thousands of different products. How are you managing replenishing? And I'm specifically talking on the OA side. How are you managing replenishing the things that are profitable continuously?
Yes, and that's a good question, because that is definitely a key to this business. Both from an OA and wholesale side. I know you said OA, but and OA has more complexities than wholesale, right? Wholesale, you just need to, okay, they're out of stock, let's revisit. But we have, part of what my operations team has built is what we call sort of replenishable trackers, and each of our shoppers are managing, their buys, and they can log into their tracker and say, okay, we can, they see the sales that are happening on the Amazon platform. They can see what the stock is. They can see the ROI, and then they can sort of see, okay, this is, and it says, hey, you need to replenish this. So then they can utilize that as a sourcing mechanism. And a lot of them, that's how they drive a lot of their sourcing. Okay, this is, these are out of stock. I source it at this store. Now I know I need we're going out of stock. So let me look for another sale. So we have a lot of internal data. We don't use software. We've toyed with a few of them, but I've always found the spreadsheets that we can sort of more manually control what's the different attributes, and we utilize that to watch and replan as needed.
Nice. All right. And one more question on sourcing. You know, if you were going to take a newer seller under your wing and you know, try to coach them up to $50K a month, what would be the advice that you would give them to set them down the right path?
I'm happy you said 50K a month too, because so many people nowadays, it's okay, I want to start and I want to be at 250K a month in 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's it can happen and you can do it, but that's setting yourself up for some high risk, because you're going to be highly leveraged to get there. So 50K, I think, is a much more reasonable number to shoot for, because you're not, you can get that without, you know, leveraging yourself. So, one thing is, again, sort of, did you say OA or just said in general?
We could do in general.
Okay, so just in general, one is understanding the sourcing method. As we've alluded to, I do all of them. Yeah, when I do all of them, I do OA, RA, and wholesale, and I think they all have, their benefits and they all have the risks. So identifying which one, fits, your background and where you think you can make the most damage, and then based off of that, I'm going to focus on the arbitrage side, RA, OA, very similar of, start by picking 2 or 3 sites that you believe are good and learn the sales cycle. Doesn't matter if you're not buying anything for a while, just learn the sales cycle, learn, how to source the site. Now, of course, if you're not finding anything in a month, then maybe that store is not for you, or you're missing some key information. Because if people are killing it at, let's say, everybody's favorite Kohl's, if you can't figure it out, then maybe you're missing something. Go to another store, but pick some stores, and learn those stores, figure out what people are doing, and learn the sales cycle, and then, as you learn one, then it gets add another one, that to me is the easiest way to start to identify, stuff. I also was a big fan when I started, and I still to this day, of sourcing lists, because, everybody, it's a hot topic, why would anybody, I know this was on Twitter, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, why would I ever use a list? These guys are just, sold by, people that only care about their bottom line, and, you can't make money with them. We do all right. At times we've used 10 lists, at the same time. Like, they're so good at introducing you to sources, so, learn what are on the list, learn the stores, people are having some level of success. Even if you don't buy it, put it on a freaking database spreadsheet and come back to it in 2 months. That's really one of the first things I did when I was trying to learn. When I started out, I did a lot of, toys, and I said, hey, I want to learn shoes. That Harvey Specter guy seems to be killing it in shoes. Let me see how to do it. First thing I did was sign up for a couple, shoe lists, shoe groups, see what everybody else is doing, and learn. There's so much good information out there, especially behind the paid walls, that people will give you, and free information as well. But some of the groups can be just so beneficial, and learn and put some money into the learning, and it really will help you increase your sourcing. And then the other big thing is just watch your spending, right? Like, don't go, if you have $5,000, don't buy 30 grand of product. Buy the $5,000. Minimize your risk as you're learning. Grow your capital. You don't have to. And I said, I know I talked about, hey, being inspired by somebody like Harvey, but I didn't go from 0 to $1 million months in a year. It was, I think, year 5 or 6 that we finally hit $1 million a month. Like, it was a very slow process. And don't be utilize what people can do as inspiration, but don't think that you need to be there overnight. It takes time, and build the processes right. And don't And again, I know people do very well with it. Of hey, I'm going to go from 0 to $1 million months in 12 to 14 months, or 12 to 24 months. But it's definitely risky. Half the people have success. I would say there's so many people right now that have major issues because they've scaled too fast. So do it in your own time. Learn. Don't risk the farm. Off the bat, trying to scale too fast.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Chad scaling is usually not a good idea. It's not just this business; it seems to be across multiple businesses. Something you said reminded me of one of my favorite quotes. You said you maybe didn't hit $1 million month till year 5, and then I remember from our last podcast you talked about how, you guys went from like 15 million a year to 20 million, fairly quickly over the course of just a couple of years. Like growth is slow, and then all at once. Once you kind of really build that base. Yeah. I think people they just want to get past that base part, and get to all that growth, and it's usually not a good thing. So,
yeah, agreed.
It's that instant gratification, the segment of the audience. So obviously diversification has been a theme through the show, but I want to take maybe a bigger stride into diversification. You bought, is it 10 properties in about 18 months, right?
Yep, that sounds about right.
All right. So what made you choose real estate as your first big off Amazon, off e-commerce move?
Well, so what happened, I would say, is early 2020. We got invited to go to Vermont to go skiing with some friends. So, the kids hadn't skied. Me and my wife probably hadn't skied in 10, 15 years. Let's do it. Let's go. So we went up and we had a friggin' blast. And we got to do this more. The kids loved it. They were still young. They're still young now, but I think they were like 5 and 7 or 4 and 6 or something like that. So wanted to get out there a little bit more, and then COVID hit. And then when COVID hit, we also started to see, some fuel into our business, right? Lots of, opportunities we utilized. We talked a lot about this in the first podcast of, able to really take advantage of that. We, in 2019, I think we did about 8 million, and we went from, that was our biggest jump. Every other year, I think we went doubled, and that year we tripled. We went 8 to 24 million or something like that. But we had some of the money coming in from, having a couple successful years, and hey, let's buy a, rental property. Not rent. Let's find a vacation home that we can rent, right? So that's where it started. Was, hey, we really enjoyed skiing in Vermont. Let's find a place for ourselves that we can utilize, and heck, while we're doing it, why don't we rent it? So we found a property we liked. We, zoomed the walkthrough and said, this is it. Let's get this property. We made an offer, got accepted. So when we went up for the inspection, we said, well, just if something goes wrong, why don't we see about look at some other properties? So then saw another property up there and was like, the first property we bought is, 5,000 square foot, 6-bedroom property on 5 acres, about 15 minutes from the resort, still in the resort town, but a little bit outside of the nightlife and stuff. So the one of the places we looked at was a duplex a mile from the resort, walking distance to all the restaurants and bars. Said, now this one's going to be a renter dream, not necessarily for us, but let's that. So we ended up, buying them both at the same time. I had no idea what I was doing with real estate. It just was at that point, the rates were under 3%. The property was still low because it was the summer of 2020. The first property we bought had been on the market for 5 years. And people thought we were insane, I think, because of the price we were paying. The second property we bought, the only reason I even saw it was because somebody posted at how high it was priced, and was shocked to see how high it was priced. So that was, that looks like a good one. Let's check it out. So, far from an expert, but I timed it fairly well. I'm like, this just seems priced so low. I did a little research on, okay, what can I get? And I'm like, okay, well, if we can rent it for about $50K, we should be able to break even, and then obviously you're building in the equity into the home. Let's try it. So we started with those two, and we just we doubled doubled our expectations of what we thought we needed to do to rent. So I was like, all right, this seems pretty good. So let's buy some more. So we just, because we closed the end of August and I think it was August and September. So we got them up and ready for the ski season. I was like, had a very good ski season in them, and said, okay, let's add some more. So, so to answer your question, what got me into it was more of a personal, we wanted to, have something for ourselves. And that's what we really liked, is having the ability to purchase these properties that we can utilize, from a personal standpoint, when we travel. Was always interested in real estate and thought, some value. And in particular at that time, there was the low rates under 3%. And, what I felt was relatively cheap real estate in the area in Vermont that we were targeting.
So what was the length of time from property number 2 to property number 3? Was it, because I'm curious about like proof of concept, like you got it ready for ski season, so you got a little bit of proof right there.
Yeah.
When did the third one go through?
I think it was May of 2021. Okay. So we got through that. We got through that first winter, started to see, okay, January, February, March, this is good. Okay, let's buy some more. So, and then, we just, we bought one in April. And then at that point it was, okay, we like to ski. And we'd always sort of debated mountain house for beach house. So then it was, okay, let's go find a beach location. So then we found a beach location and purchased, 3 properties, within a few months down there of, okay, this one, we like these properties. Let's, and again, similarly was, okay, this one's for us as a family. Hey, this one's probably more of a rental, and let's, and that's how we sort of identified it. And we really liked the mountain. So that's where we bought the majority of them at first.
Nice.
If you don't mind me asking, just because I'm curious, like this is something I've always wanted to do. Maybe haven't had the guts to do it. Is your play with the Airbnbs? Are you like rolling as much money into paying off the properties as you possibly can, or are you cash flowing those properties for cash right now?
So it's a mix of both. So when we first purchased the properties, it said they were under 3%. So it was, hey, this is great. So we purchased them, and in most cases we're able to cash flow them. And then, but really the goal was, hey, even if you break even, you're building down your equity, and especially as my side hustle, since Amazon is bringing in the income, I don't need to be cash flow positive to make it work, because you're building the equity into the properties. But we ended up doing better than expected, and we're cash flowing some of those. Then, better or worse, as you got into 2021, the interest rates started to go up, and it was like, wait, I don't want to get a 5% mortgage. So we started to purchase some properties just outright. That we didn't have to have a mortgage on, because 5% at the time when you have some sitting at 2.7 seems pretty high. So we have some that there's no mortgage, so it makes it even easier to cash flow on. Of course, now looking back, 5% doesn't seem so bad. Right. I think our last one that we ended up closing on one in December. Because I don't like to make anything easy. Let's close on our largest property in Q4. I think it's sitting at like 7.25%, but it was one of those things that we couldn't turn down the opportunity, so we'll make it work with that. But yeah, so some of them, as a conglomerate, we cash flow, and then we can utilize that to purchase more properties down the line, or put towards down payments.
Beautiful. Now,
hold on for 1 second.
Yeah.
Follow coming down. Sorry, guys, but my dog
That's
had to
okay.
get out of the room.
That's all right. I'll make a quick note here. All right. So let's say someone, comes to you, Jeff, I'm in a place where I can start something off Amazon. Like, where would you tell sellers to explore in 2025? Would it still be real estate? Would it be some sort of sweaty startup, go start a power washing business? Like, what do you think is good today?
So what I would say one is, what's your passion? What excites you? What interests you? For me, again, it was having that interest in real estate as well as having it as something that I could utilize. So that's why I dove into it. So I think there's still money to be made in real estate. Obviously, the market, the property values have probably doubled since I started this, or at least up 30%, and the rates have tripled, or 2.5 up as well. So it's definitely a more challenging. But then you meet some people like Michaela, that used to be an e-commerce person, and she's just absolutely crushing it with real estate still. So I think there's opportunities out there in real estate. There's opportunity in stocks. There's opportunities in crypto, maybe, I guess. Again, I'm not a crypto guy, so I don't know. So really, I'd say is more of what there's opportunities everywhere. Well, what excites you, what matches your skill set, and focus on that, and less about chasing what somebody says is good. Is find out what fits your profile and interest you, because you're more likely to be successful with something that you have a passion in than something you don't.
Yeah, it's great advice. You have to be interested in it for a long term.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're going to shift gears here a little bit, because you are involved with software coming out, right? I want to talk about this new software that you're working on. Start with the problem that the software is trying to solve for Amazon sellers.
Yeah. So for me, one of the things that how I first got involved with the software is, I utilize, one of the standard sort of listing and shipping softwares, and we do some holds, right? And sometimes we buy wholesale product and we don't ship it all, and we're managing it all in spreadsheets, and it just became cumbersome and difficult to manage. And the solutions that exist right now for having the warehousing functionality doesn't exist doesn't meet our business needs for the holds of the inventory we have. So we went out looking for other products and was shell shocked at some of the prices that exist for warehousing solutions. So that was my initial intro of, hey, there really needs to be a better solution out there for housing and managing holds and your inventory than exists right now. So that was the initial sort of reach out to the company that we're working with is Prep Ship Hub, and I've been utilizing their software for over 5 years, because it's utilized at our prep center, and really the prep center is a co-owner of the the software, because it was built to meet some challenges that they had with the software in the market to be able to function as a prep center. So I reached out to them and said, hey, your software does a great job from what I can see from the prep center side of managing this, and I'm looking for a warehousing solution. They said, hey, we got it. We're actually looking to turn the software from a front end, from a prep center software into an individual seller. Would you be interested in sort of helping us out with it? So that's sort of how I got involved with, which was my first need, was the warehousing component. And then, a couple other things that, really have pushed to make sure that, that the software includes is, multi-platform, right? So we do sell on, Walmart, we sell on eBay, and we sell on Shopify via, our retail store. Our point of sale system is actually Shopify. So, and right now we have some very manual processes to pull reports and understanding the profitability of it. So, working with them to try to make sure all of these platforms all exist and are supported by the software, which is Prepship Hub, is one of the asks, and they're looking to work, include, be able to support all, Walmart, eBay, and Shopify, and even, Canada and Mexico, because that's another one that a lot of the other softwares doesn't have included, and you need to, I have all these manual processes to try to understand the profitability, on those, and try to have that all included within one single software. And then we talked a lot about, earlier about our returns process, and that the spreadsheets that we utilize to scan scan the returns in, and it can bog down with the amount of data that is in there. It's probably better in a database, but we started it in Excel. But really, let's put that into the software. So the software is really good for processing customer returns. So when you get a box, you scan I think it's just scan the tracking, the UPC, and it brings up, okay, this is your return order, and then you can pick what's in there and then scan the LPN and get all the returns data. A lot of the stuff that I talked about that is in my spreadsheets is now right into that software to sort of speed up the process. And then you scan it, and then you can ship, hey, I want it to go, it's damaged, let me move it to eBay. Well, nope, it's going back to Amazon new. So it all flows within the same software, instead of having one spreadsheet for holds, one spreadsheet for eBay, one spreadsheet for this. It's all within in the software. So that's really the goal, is giving you the ability to have some warehousing functionality if you want to manage your holds, make processing returns easier, and then having that multi-platform support all within one application, so that you're not constantly going from one place to the next. And then just in general, besides myself, we have some other Amazon sellers that are involved, and really just trying to make it hit some of the needs for Amazon sellers. One functionality, it's not going to be there at launch, but that we're going to look to include is, hey, when you're somebody like me and you have OA, RA, and wholesale, it's nice to be able to know, hey, run a quick report. Well, what how much is my wholesale sales? How much is my RA sales? How is this specific shopper doing? And, to my knowledge, there's not software out there right now that allows me to do that. So, we use some of the existing software that's out there, and you export it out, and you got to, again, spreadsheets and reports, and you got to code your SKUs. And we're trying to, rework some of that so that you can have these reports, at your fingertips, instead of having to download and, format future reports.
Nice. Now, I know you said you could offer, maybe a discount or an extended trial, and we'll put all that in the show notes once we hammer all that out. But where should people go and find that if they're curious and want to learn more?
Yeah, so the software is called Prepship Hub, so you certainly can go there. We have not officially launched yet, or they have not officially launched yet, but should be launching some point in May. I guess depends on when this podcast is released or when you're watching it, because maybe when it is watched, it is launched. But the Prepship Hub does have the information there. You can certainly reach out to me as well. And right now they're offering a 30-day trial, but anybody that's coming through this podcast, we can bump that up to 60 days.
Nice. Perfect. I'll make sure to drop that all in the show notes right at the top for anybody who wants to check that out. So I want to move on to a lightning round of kind of questions and kind of get your quick thoughts on things. What is, I guess, as you kind of think about your business, think about life and stuff like that, what's your definition of winning at this stage in life and business?
Having more time, more family time, more time for myself and the family, is winning for me. Being able to be at my kids' sporting events, help coach out and be there for them.
Nice. Can you give me one Amazon myth that you wish would die already?
Man. Obviously from my perspective, the arbitrage is dead myth, or is dying, is always probably the easy one. ironically, we're very big in wholesale. It's just that I'm constantly battling the arbitrage is dead, myth on Twitter and other places. It really, and I know there's probably two answers, but it's either arbitrage is dead or you can't scale arbitrage. And can you do a $500 million business in arbitrage? Yeah, maybe not, but most people aren't going to be getting there in wholesale either. It's not like the numbers that you can achieve with arbitrage is massive. And if it fits your skill set, don't be scared away of it. Do it. And if wholesale is your skill set, if you're if that works for you, do it. But it's for whatever reason, it's one that pushes my buttons when I'm on Twitter and I see the wholesale person say, you can't scale, arbitrage, or always dead, and all the risk. And really, it all comes down to platform risk. It's not that the sourcing model risk, because there's just as much risk with, brand direct, in my opinion. It's just a matter of how you manage those risks.
Yeah, if there was a Knights of the Round Table as far as defending arbitrage, there's at least several members of that the Knights of the Round Table here on this podcast currently.
Yeah,
one of the things I find funny about that whole arbitrage is dead thing, or you can't scale arbitrage particularly. First of all, how many people actually want to scale over a $10 billion a year business? Like, yeah. I mean, sure, there are a lot of people I think who say that, but in reality, I don't know that there are a lot of people who A, want to do that, or B, are willing to do what it takes to do that, which is okay. Like that's not, that's not a problem. You can have a very great lifestyle with a $5 or $7 million a year business. It's, I don't know.
Yeah,
kind of a silly argument.
Yeah, it's always amazes me, especially when you see the people that are doing well with arbitrage and say, I'm going to go focus on wholesale.
Yeah.
Why? Well, what's your reason? Well, because, this person told me you can't do it. I'm like, you can, and again, it's do both, or do the one that fits you, but don't leave something just because, people are screaming that it's dead. If anything, at some points I should just shut up, because really, more people leave, the better it is for me. But, again, I just believe it's something that you can do any of these models. In my years of doing it, there's been years that my main sourcing method has been retail arbitrage. There's been times where it's online arbitrage, and it's times that most profits come from wholesale. It really ebbs and flows for us. And, we'll probably do 10 million in wholesale this year, where we're not, it's not that I don't, have anything against wholesale. Wholesale is good too, but it's just, I think, and it's not everybody. It's just the way that it's presented by some folks is the one that, pushes my buttons of like,
absolutely,
you can't scale it.
So you've got kids, and so you obviously get asked a lot of questions. But you've also got you got a Discord. You're active on social media, and I'm sure people are DMing you and things like that. What's the best question that you've been asked over the past, let's say, 3 months?
Oh man, I think some of the best questions I get is because I also scream a lot about repricing, and sometimes I've got some really good questions of clearly they're trying to understand hey, how do you scale this? How do I manage this? What do I give to my VAs for repricing? And that's where clearly that person is thinking next level, not like where do you find products? No, it's where how are you sort of deploying your resources? How are you managing your repricing decisions? When are you using a yo-yo? When are you what percentage of buy box are you losing by extending your time at your max as part of a yo-yo? Just there's been a lot of good questions like that have come from people following up on some of my ramblings on Twitter.
Nice. If we, and I know this is the lightning round, but if we could just kind of dig that hole a little bit, Do you have some sort of like decision tree or rubric that you use when it comes to repricing of like how to reprice your products or when to change strategies?
Yeah, that is that's probably a podcast in itself. I mean, we have over 30, I think, or probably over 20, somewhere between 20 and 30 repricing strategies. And then, and we deploy, different ones based on, the based on the products and based on the market and based on what makes sense. And it's, there's two main ways you make money with this. It's when you're buying it, the sourcing, and the repricing of it. And so many people miss the repricing aspect of it, or they use a repricer that just, and not even a repricer, but they use a model that's just follow lowest price. And it's, you just lose so much money when you're following lowest price. Like that is not an optimal one. And even when you just do, there's a lot of, repricing software now that has AI. I'm just going to set it to AI. You're not going to maximize your value or your business if you're just utilizing one or two repricing settings. You really need to understand. Again, I guess it also depends. I have so many different SKUs, right? If you just have 20 SKUs and it's just selling Nike socks, then it's probably different. But it's understanding the market, it's understanding the supply and demand, and just like to give a point, right? Like if I have a discontinued product, that's flying, I don't need 40% of the buy box. I don't want 40% of the buy box. I want lower percent of the buy. I can't get it anymore. It's let me, how do I maximize the price? Or hey, this item is falling in, I see it's declining and it's going to tank, and I have zero belief that it's going to recover. Then I want a very different strategy, right? So it's understanding that and how you can utilize that to maximize it, to really increase your ROI.
Awesome. Well, we may have to deep dive on your repricing. I kind of want to get in your mind about that now.
Yeah, it's a big one, and it's a big key too. And for a lot of people, and I know for me, it's my least favorite task of the whole business. Especially once I got out of the warehouse. And I think I'd rather pack boxes, I think, than sit in front of the computer repricing. But it is the most important task outside of purchasing the products. Is managing it, your repricing, and it's the hardest to delegate, because and that's where I struggle too. Like, hey, I want my operations staff to help, but they don't know what I bought it. They don't understand the market. So it is a difficult task to manage, and I still struggle with it to this day. But it's definitely something that we put a lot of time and thought and effort into.
That's a pretty unique hot take as far as the people we've talked to. The far more importance on repricing than we're used to hearing. So I like that. Jeff, over the past, say, 6 months or so, is there a piece of content, whether it's a book, podcast, or a blog or something that's had a significant impact that you found yourself thinking about long after you read it or saw it?
I'm not sure this is really the intent of your question, but I'm going to probably go back 12 months and I'm going to put it back on you guys of sort of putting me back a little bit in the spotlight by doing your guys' podcasts. I think that was more like 11 months ago, but I had sort of stepped away from social media and to an extent it sort of reduced sort of the networking side of things, because I was sort of in my own bubble. I had, core people that I've networked with for 5-10 years, but as you guys know, that the people come and go pretty quickly. And when you sort of disconnect, and even that partly didn't disconnect, I was just, the old guy hanging on Facebook where, was dying. Right. So you guys sort of, when I did your podcast and sort of, I think started following you guys on Twitter, it sort of opened my eyes. Hey, look at all these Amazon sellers. And I know, like, Amazon Twitter, people, oh, it's dead, but come over to Amazon Facebook. So that really sort of re-energized me a little bit, got that competitive juices going, as well as I'm seeing other people and hearing what they're doing and introducing me to things. Because, you always need to be learning in this business. And, if I'm sitting in my own little area and then, you lose touch with some of that stuff. And, by getting back out there, it really has helped introduce me to some things that I probably was missing in my own little bubble when I disconnected from social media / aged out being on Facebook.
I know that people are going to want to, if they don't already, they're going to want to shoot you a follow, maybe join your Discord. Where should people go to find out more about you and be able to follow you and your Twitter ramblings?
Yeah, I mean, I'm Jeff Sends It, on Twitter. That's where I've been most active. Well, I do have a Discord, FBABasecamp.com is website. And I think it links you to our Discord. And we post some stuff there as well. Myself and Joe's, other guy that owns that. Those are probably the two best places. I have an Instagram account, but I haven't really figured out Instagram yet. So that's probably the two best places to find me.
Perfect. I'll make sure links are all below. So we always end the show with a quote of the week, and this one, this week's is in the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity by Sun Tzu and The Art of War. And I thought that in this time on Amazon, when everyone's got kind of a bad feeling or things like that, but I mean, what you're doing and what you talk about, it kind of flies right in the face of that. Like, there still is opportunity. The opportunity is still big. And hopefully, if Amazon kind of figures out how to get, counterfeiters and people who are selling stolen product off the platform, hopefully the future is bright. That's what I'm holding on to. So, yeah. Jeff, dude, thanks so much, man. Absolute blast talking to you every single time. I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that's the pod for this week, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to Clear the Shelf with Chris and Chris. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot on your phone and share to Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite FBA group, and be sure to tag me and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear more from us in the future. Also, I'd like to give you some free gifts for listening. Head over to rabbittrailchallenge.com and repricerchallenge.com for some free courses to further your business. Thanks for listening.